Yep. Good evening. So yesterday we discussed about components. We learned about one example how we can design components and work with components in React. Right. So you tried them, right? Were you able to design multiple components and integrate? Huh? Already I posted that example, right? So listening is not enough. You need practice. So I will give you exercises in the next levels because this is just beginning. We have to go and discuss a lot of things, very complex. So I will give you tasks to try practice. So you must be very perfect in day by day practice. Beginning level, if you are not up to mark what we discuss in the class, later you cannot catch the speed. Later you cannot catch the speed, right? You cannot handle. So keep it updated day by day. Okay. So technically, how to design a component, how do we work with components, multiple components, this already we learned. Now, once we are good with basic component, I told you various techniques of designing component. What are the various techniques of component? So one is we learned how to design function component, right? You have another method. So we can create a class component. Let's see the point. We have function component, class component. In function component, already we learned about various options, right? So online people, if you have any doubt, I will get back to you towards the end of the session. You can raise your hand. I can get back. Okay. At the end of the session, we will discuss. Right. So function component, how to configure, how to define, some techniques I explained. Components can be class. We can have a class component also. How to define a class component? Let's see. React class component. Previously, we learned function component. Class component, that means you know already in JavaScript, what is a class? Technically, class is a program template. Technically, class is a program template. Class is a program template. So you know already, you learned in JavaScript, object-oriented approach. So it is a program template. And actually, class have various behaviors. Class have various behaviors. Class can work like a blueprint. Class can work like a model. Class can work like an entity. So class have various behaviors. That is the reason people who know little bit object-oriented programming, they always say that class is a blueprint or class is a model. But class is a program template. So it have the behavior of blueprint, model, and entity. Not every time. So technically in JavaScript or any object-oriented programming, so we call class as a template. Template means what is meant by a program template? What is the meaning of a program template? A program template comprises of predefined features. A template contains predefined features which you can implement and customize according to your requirements. Technically, what is the meaning of a template? Program template provides a set of values and methods which you can implement and customize according to requirements. So program template provides set of values and methods which you can implement and customize according to requirements. And generally, class have various behaviors. That's the reason if anybody says the basic OOP learners who learn Java, .NET, all these C++, if you ask them what is class, they will immediately say blueprint. They will immediately say model. So why? Because technically it works as blueprint or a model or entity. Simple point I will tell you here. Actually, we have business requirements. And according to business requirements, we prepare the data. That means as per when you are developing a project, we design data, and this data will be according to the business requirements. That means according to the business requirements, we prepare the data. Now what happens is our developers will write a class. So to implement the business functionality. So this class, if a class is mapping to business requirements, that means a class is trying to tell the direct business requirements. If it is mapping to business requirements, then it is called entity. If a class is mapping to direct data, what data is used for the application, in that case, we will call it as a model. So class is representing business, then it is entity. If it is representing the data directly, then it is model. Right? Technically, class is not always entity, and class is not always model. Class is a template which can have a behavior of entity or a model. I hope majority you people heard about this concept. If any class designed for business requirements, and talking to the business requirements, mapping to the business requirements, this mechanism is called as ORM. Have you heard about this? You heard about this? ORM, Object Relational Mapper. ORM is a technique, Object Relational Mapping. So this is Object Relational Mapping. These days, earlier, people have to write for data. Now developers are not writing for data. We are writing for business requirements. Our strategy changed from all technologies, Java, .NET, PHP, Python, every technology is following ORM now. Earlier, we have to write for data directly. We are not writing for data now. We are writing for business. The approach to communicate with the data changed because direct communication with data is different. Business requirements will be different because business requirements will be changing and data will be according to business requirements. Then we ask our developers not to write for data, write for business. So When you design a class and that is mapping to business requirements, then we call entity. And when you design a class that is mapping to data requirements directly, then we call as model. So in different situations, it have different behaviors. And in both situations, if a class is used for accessing, reusing in various locations, then it is considered as a blueprint. It is okay and good to tell any learner that it is a blueprint which contains some data and logic you can access and use anywhere you want. But it is not good for a technician to tell about that like that. So for a technical guy, class is a template. It's a program template. So it have two methods, ORM and data. So it has entity and it have model. Now the point here is, so that means class is defined as entity when it is mapping to business requirements. We will see that, we will discuss about this. And the class is defined as model when it is mapping to data requirements. That is the important, the business requirements and the data requirements. Now you learned about a class in JavaScript, right? Now tell me what a class can contain in JavaScript. What are the members in class? What a class can contain? What are the members of class? Generally, JavaScript class comprises of one is, it comprises of a constructor, it comprises of properties, it comprises of accessors, and it comprises of methods. Only these can be in a class. So a JavaScript class can contain only these. A class can contain constructor, properties, accessors, and methods. So technically, you know the purpose of them. So what is the purpose of constructor? What is the purpose of constructor? A constructor is used for instantiation. It is used for instantiation. A constructor is used for instantiation. Instantiation means it is used for creating of objects. A constructor is used for instantiation. So what is the purpose of properties? Property stores the data. Data is stored in property. And what is accessor? What is accessor? Accessor gives a fine grained control over property. Fine grained control over property. That means it is responsible for, it can configure restriction for reading and assigning value. It can configure restriction for reading and assigning the value. It can control how it is going to read and assign the value. Accessors will give a fine control over properties. Already properties are doing some work. Accessors will give a more control over properties. Properties are used to store data. Remember, Many times in companies, we use class for components, we use function for components. You cannot use a class without knowing it. You must have a complete idea on class in order to use it as a component. You cannot simply use a class of JavaScript without knowing what it is, how it works, what it contains. So that is the reason this knowledge is very important, right? Without knowing a class, you cannot use a class as a component. You should know that class contains constructor, it contains properties, accessors, and methods. And constructor is for instantiation, creating an object. And properties are used for storing the data. Data in a class is stored in properties. To give a fine control over the properties, you need accessors. So I will show one example. See, now suppose we have methods. Method defines the actions to perform. Method defines the actions to perform. What functionality to perform? That functionality is decided by method. Method defines the actions to perform. What functionality it should perform? So that is decided by these methods. So if anybody asked you in interviews like, can we declare a variable in class? Can we declare a variable in class? Can we declare a variable in class? What do you say? No, you cannot declare a variable in class. Class cannot have variable already given. Class can contain only 4 things. Class can contain only 4 things. Either it is a constructor, or it is a method, or it is an accessor, or it is an property. No variables. You cannot declare variable in a class. So for example, see here. So I will give a simple, see, first I need to teach some knowledge about class. Without that, you can't handle it as a component. So first thing here, I'm having a class. This is general JavaScript I'm showing you. So class is product. In this, I am declaring var name is equal to TV. It is not allowed. Variables are not allowed in a class because class can contain only a constructor or a method or an accessor or a property. So you cannot have a variable. Now how data is stored? So the question is, you cannot have a variable in class. Now the question is, so why we cannot declare a variable in class? Why we cannot declare a variable in class? Why we cannot declare a variable in class? Why you cannot declare a variable in class? Variables cannot declare in class. Why we cannot declare a variable in class? Simple. So if you understood the definition of class, what is class? Class is a program template. Template means it will provide some values which you can customize according to requirements. And variables are immutable. Variables are immutable. Their structure cannot be changed. Then how you will use in a class? Because class can contain only members which are mutable. That means structure can be changed, then only it is possible in a class. Class can contain only mutable members and variables are immutable. Variables are immutable. You cannot change the structure. Then how it is possible? Class is a template. Anything should be customized. and variable is not allowing to customize. So it is not allowed in class. You can have it outside class. Then, so why it is not allowed in a class? Why we cannot declare? Because variable is immutable, and class cannot contain immutable members because it is a template. If it is a template, it cannot contain immutable members. Now the question is, then how data is stored in class? How data is stored in class? If variable is not allowed, then how to store data in a class? By using property. Data is stored in property. Data is stored in property. So what is difference between variable and property? What is difference between variable and property? You know, just now you saw it. What is difference between variable and property? Variable immutable, property mutable. Property is mutable, right? So in a class, you cannot have variables. Then how to store data? You have to store data in a property. So what is difference? Mutable and immutable. Similarly, another important point is, can we define a function in class? Can we define a function in class? No. You cannot have a function also in class. Function cannot be there in class because function also same immutable. Then how you define functionality? So no, you cannot have a function. So you can have only methods. You can have only methods. Functions are not allowed in class. There is another point I will tell you, right? We will define here. One more option is. So that means we have function here. We have function. I am trying to write a function here. Function, some function. It's not allowed. Function is not allowed. In a class, we can have only property. In that you can store some data. In that you can have a method, you can have some functionality. No functions are allowed. No functions are allowed. But very important here is, so you can define a variable in methods. You can define a variable in methods. That means variable cannot be a direct member of class. Variable cannot be a direct member of class. It cannot be a direct member of class. So you see now, I'm giving var x equal to 10. It is possible. So variable cannot be a direct member of class, right? It is not class member. Class member means only 4. So that can be only properties, methods, accessors, and construct. Now, very important here, this is the property. We have data, this is the method. In that method, I am writing a function, f1. We are configuring a function. You can have it. That means class, this is where people are confused, right? So I asked that, can a class have a variable or a function? Because that is the point to understand that, can a class have variable and function as members? Variables and functions cannot be the members of a class. They can be a member of a method. Direct members are only methods, accessors, and properties and construct. Right? Inside the method, you can have a variable or a function. That means variables, you can define variables and functions in methods. right? So that is important. Technically, while working with class, these are all key points. Now, what is the purpose of property? To store data. What is the property of a method? To handle a functionality. What is the property? What is the purpose of accessors? Accessors are used to control the properties in a better way. I said that properties are mutable. They can change. They can change. So according to the situation, suppose see now, you might already learned all this in JavaScript, but I am just refreshing those points because without knowing this, you cannot use this in a React component, right? So the point here, suppose you see, I'm creating a class called product. In this class, I have a property product name. I'm giving underscore. In developer's point of view, underscore before any name indicates that it requires further implementation. Further implementation. That means its functionality is not finished. So if a developer have to tell another developer that it needs further implementation, we put this underscore, just it is a naming convention, right? So that is the reason for variable names and all underscores are allowed at the beginning, right? You cannot start with number. We can start with underscore or alphabet. Why underscore specially? So many points are there. This is one key concept. Now, actually, we will put here, create an object, let obj is equal to new product. We are creating an object for that class. Actually, everybody can access this product name and can put a value into it. So it can, everybody can put a value into it. But I don't want like that. What I want is, I want the product name to accept and store value only from the users whose role is admin. Anybody else tries to store or change the product name, it should not work. That means I should not allow this product name to store a value, but it should allow to store value for certain users. Then how it can change behavior? If I make it read only, it is always read only. If I make it read only, then always read only. That means I am changing that for you, few users, it should have read only. For few users, it should allow read write. How it is possible? How you can create a property which can change its behavior according to situation? So that is with the help of accessors. Now what I am doing here is, I am creating here, see, I am accepting here, so a variable user name. I will use a prompt, enter name, okay. After that, I am using, so designation. I will put a prompt, so enter designation. Okay, username, designation, password, something. So many things we can accept. Now here, username can be anything, but designation is admin. Then he will able to set the value into this property. Then we will write accessors. We write accessor get product name. This is getter. What this have to do? It is an accessor which should return this value, whatever value present inside it. So what this accessor should return? It should return this dot underscore product name, whatever value stored inside it. That means this is an accessor for this property to store the value, to read the value and display, return. That means whenever you access product name, it will return what is stored inside this. So that's okay. Now what should happen here is, we will put a setter. Getter is for reading, setter is for storing, assigning. I will use a setter, product name. And what this setter have to do is it should take a new name. It should take a new name and it should store that name inside this. That means I am just verifying if designation is equal to admin. If designation is equal to admin, then only allow this dot underscore product name to set the new name. That means whatever new name you entered, it is allowed to store only when designation is admin. Otherwise, you just display a message saying that so unauthorized. So you cannot, or I will simply put here a binding expression I will add here. So I will simply say here, so hello, here I'll say hello, hello, and that username, you are not authorized to set product name. This message I want to display. This message you want to define. Now we have a property. Only one property is there. And to control that property, we are using accessors. That means this is a getter which is used for reading the value. This is a setter which is for taking a new value and assigning. But while assigning, it will make sure that the designation is admin. Then only it will allow to assign. Otherwise, it will not. That means accessors, technically, what accessor can do is it gives a fine-grained control over property. Fine control over property to decide whether everybody cannot read. We can put that restriction also. We can write a condition for reading also. I written condition only for writing. For example, you are trying to watch some real estate related websites. So, or some Naukri sites. So they say disclosed salary. Salary is not easily visible. And you can open that and see once you sign in, only sign in, then the salary is visible. Otherwise, not visible. That means for guest users, they cannot see. For registered user, they can see. That means how we will change it? How we will change the behavior of the same property to show value and not to show value, that is controlled by accessors. So now here I am writing a simple condition. So first we will take here obj dot product name is equal to whatever the product name they have entered. Here I will ask to enter product name also, where product name is equal to prompt enter product name. Okay. And here I will access that product name. That means whatever they entered in the prompt, it will be stored. But it will not store for everybody. Only before storing, it will verify. Remember, this is a setter now. We are sending this product name. That means where it is sent. So we are sending this product name. That means this is sent into this new name. And this new name has to be assigned into this product name. Before doing that, it will verify this condition. Before doing that, it will verify the condition. It will not simply assign, right? That means now what we are doing here, we are writing if obj.productName, that means if product name is defined, then print it, document.write. I will say product name, whatever the name they have entered, obj.product name. This is getter. That means by using the getter, you are accessing the name and displaying. This is setter, right? Here you are so setting the value, setter. Here you are getting the value, right? This is getter. Now you see here, when I run this here, enter name, okay, John, enter designation, suppose manager, and product name is some Samsung TV, and you are not authorized. You are not authorized. Okay, let's put here name John, designation is admin, and product name Samsung TV. It's allowed. Any another designation, you are not allowed. That means it is changing its behavior. So it is changing its behavior. Class cannot have variables as members. So this you will see in React, right? So we will not allow the users to store data in a variable in a class. We will not allow to store variable at all. Even it is allowed in a method also, we will not allow. We will not ask. Why? Because it's are immutables. Anywhere we don't prefer variable, we will say that don't use variable. So use always properties. So people without this knowledge directly jump into React properties and variables and all these things. So you can't handle that until or unless you know the complete infrastructure architecture of class, right? So that, because for experienced people, we can conduct complete 1.5 hour interview on only this topic class, if we want, right? For entire, you put 20 years experience, I have questions for you, right? I have questions for you. You can't answer, right? Because architecturally, internally, so many things are there, which you may not have experienced until or unless you used them in your projects, right? So even you have experience, many times you need to explore those concepts, and you will not get chance because your project doesn't require them, right? That's the reason you might have limited things. You learned JavaScript, everybody. You know this about accessors. Then how you will handle in React? That's the point. That's the reason I am discussing these points, very important. So first point is clear. That means directly I will not go into the class until I explain all this. So I will give this example. This is example, and let me copy this. This is just JavaScript example. This is just a JavaScript example. So point here is class can have only properties, accessors, methods, and constructors. Constructor. That is the basic point. Okay, next important is, once you know about accessor, is there any another work for accessor? Accessor is not only for this reason. Actually, accessors can do lot of other things, right? Lot of other things. For example, see, generally where we use this accessor, I will give another situation here. Suppose now I am defining a class register. In this register class, so we are configuring. So this is class register. In this we have a property. So we configure some property, that is, suppose name. Name is a string. We put some name. Some name like this, Samsung TV, like this we define. Now we have another option. So that is rating. Rating is an object type. Rating is an object type. You know arrays, objects, how to handle. It is an object type. And in this rating, so you have another object. So rate. So we have another property rate. In this rate, so you have another, it is again object type. In this we have count. Count is suppose 3000. And here 3000, that is count. And here we have rating rate type. I just given type as 4.5 or say value, rate value. Okay, that is 4.5. Now, how do we access this value? How do we access this value? A lengthy hierarchy is there. Now tell me the shortest way, fast, how I can access directly value. How to access this value directly? Suppose I am creating an object, let obj is equal to new register. Now through obj you can access rating. In that rating you have to access rate. In that rate you have to access value. This hierarchy is compulsory. I am saying that just with one reference I want it. So with one reference I want it. With one reference I want it. Then we will create an accessor for it. Rate value. This is an accessor. What it will return? It will return this dot rating dot rate dot value. That's simple. Now how you can access the rate value? That means I'm say document dot write. So rate value. So is how much? You have to just access obj dot rate value. That's it. This is going to access. This is going to access and display that rate value directly. That is the purpose of an accessor. Right? So accessors are used in various situations. Right? A class contains so many things. So that means you can access that the inner references by using this. These are very important when you are dealing with closures and all. You might have learned about closures in JavaScript. So technically, this is very important in handling these situations. It's not just control over properties, right? This is another way of dealing with it. Just this is another example. So how we can configure a class, right? How you define a class. So I hope properties, methods, and accessors are clear. You know all these, right? Methods same, method parameters. Already you learned everything, na? Right? REST parameters, all type of parameters in the methods, everything is same, right? Now I hope you already learned about constructor also, right? Constructor of class. So what the rule of constructor in class? Constructor rule is there. One JavaScript constructor have a rule. What is it? JavaScript constructors have this rule. Every constructor in every concept we have that, but here JavaScript constructor have a rule. So rule is like not about naming and all, right? So not about naming and all. Actually, the constructor rule is, I hope you know the constructor rule is every derived class constructor must have a super call. You know this, huh? Every derived class constructor must have a super call. That is mandatory. That is mandatory. So this is the very important rule about constructor you will learn in JavaScript. I am not going in depth about constructor again here because that I will leave with your JavaScript knowledge. So, but this rule I am explaining because we have to follow this rule in React. So the rules, the concepts which we have to follow in React, only those I am highlighting here. Right? I am not discussing everything about class. Huh? So that is your JavaScript. Here I am highlighting only the points which we need for a class in React. Okay. So constructor rule is, suppose when you learned about here, suppose we have a class. This is base class, and base class have a constructor. This is document.write. This is base class constructor. Okay. So, and I am having another class, derived class. And you know how derived class uses the base class by using extends. Am I right? So it extends which class? Base class. And here we have a constructor. This is actually document.write. This is derived class constructor. We have derived class constructor. We create an object for derived class, new derived, and we are no need to access, constructor will run automatically. And you see here derived class constructor is coming, but inspect, you will see in the console we have an error saying that super constructor must call super constructor in derived class. It is compulsory. It is compulsory that the derived class must call the superclass constructor. In Java, .NET, C++, implicitly it calls it. So no problem. Implicitly, there also this rule is there. In every object-oriented programming, first base class constructor will be called, then followed by derived class. In every OOP language. But there implicitly it is called. So no problem. But in JavaScript, it doesn't. That is the reason in JavaScript, it is compulsory that you have to explicitly call the superclass constructor. How do we call the superclass constructor in base class? Just by using super keyword. Am I right? And if superclass constructor having a message, suppose it is having a parameter, we pass the value here. Am I right? Hello. And you can display that message here. Suppose I am displaying that message here. So plus, so MSG. So then I will put a BR, okay, like this. I will add like this. Just message I will display. That means if superclass constructor is parameterized, you know that. You have to pass the parameters into it. If it is not parameterized, it's simply super. Now this satisfies that and it will display. So it is compulsory that you have to define a super call here, right? So if there is a base class constructor, then it's compulsory should be called in the derived class if it is extending. If it is extending, mandatory. Otherwise, it is not complete inheritance. Extending is incomplete. Extending will be complete only when you follow this rule. This is very important rule you need to follow. This is the rule you have to follow. Now, by understanding this rule, the point is very simple. React component, React class component, React class component, class component extends, it extends React.component base. It extends React.component base. That means when you create a class, so when you create any class, that means class, suppose some name, home. And this is an ordinary JavaScript class. How React will think that it is a component? How it gets the behavior of component? How it gets the behavior of component? How React thinks that it is a component? So for that, to get the behavior of component, it should extend which class? React component base class. It should extend React component base class. Then only this home is considered as a component. It is considered as a component. So it is considered as component. So technically, so you have to configure React class components. And very important, every component which is configured as a class component should extend React component. React component is a member of React core library. It is a member of React core library, right? So it is a member of React core library. It is a member of React core library. So you have to import this in order to use it. You have to import that. So that means now how do we create a component? You see, how do we create a class component? Let's go. And in the SRC folder components, already yesterday we created a lot of components. I will create one more component as a new. I will give as register component, okay, .js, register component.js, okay. Now I want this component to be configured as a class component. So export, default, all these things are same, right? Default, export, default class. Otherwise you cannot use it in another modules, right? Class name is register component, but it is an ordinary JavaScript class. So how it will get component behavior? So that means it should extend. It extends React.component class. It extends React.component class. And how to you access this component? That means we have to import. Import what? React. So React from React. React is the core module. From that you have to import this React. This React contains this React component class, right? We can access that component class and you can use it. Actually, library is built in a very complex way. To explain that library later, I will tell you. I told you that we will discuss the complete infrastructure end to end at the end of React, not at the beginning of React, right? Because once you are good with React, everything you can build from scratch, everything. First, you should know how it works, right? Then you can build everything. So the point here is actually this React, generally your libraries, the library that you are using for React is actually built with a namespace concept. Generally, we have a namespace. Namespace is a collection of related type of classes. A namespace is a collection of related type of classes, and it can have sub namespaces also. That means this namespace can have a class called component, right? It is a class. It can have another class under one namespace. It can have so many options. Service, another class. So now this is the namespace. Under this is a class. Then generally, how do we access this library? We access this library React.component. That means the namespace name and class name. This is the namespace name. React is the namespace name and component is the class name. Class name, because you may be confused like why you are accessing a class with dot React dot, right? Because classes in the library are organized in a namespace architecture. So these namespace things you will learn in TypeScript. I will tell you when we discuss TypeScript, we will see namespace. There you will learn how to build a library for React. We can build a library for React. So there you will learn how to build a library for React, right? So this is already built library. We are using it. That is the reason you can see this React is a namespace. What it is importing namespace. And in that namespace, this is the namespace. In that we have a class called component. So React.component is not class. React is namespace. In the namespace, we have a component class. That means every class that you create, if it should have the behavior of a component, then it should implement React component. So this is the namespace and this is the class. So you should know that. So here React core library. So in this React is a namespace and component is class. That means actually it is built like this: namespace React. In that React namespace, you will have a class called component like this. Then we access like this: React dot component. The class is accessed in this way. Actually, there are so many aliasing techniques also. Later you will see that when you learn about TypeScript, you can do. So initially React component. Now this is a component. Now very important, as per the rules of the component, you see here, this is the React component class. When you see the component class, you see this is, I'm just right clicking on this and say go to definition. Go to definition, it will take me to the definition of that component. You see this is a component class. In that component class, you can see this component class is having some constructors, read only, so many things are there inside it. This type of library you will learn how to build in TypeScript. We will discuss about that, right? How to build that type of library that you will learn. So as of now, so what is this React and what is this component? So a namespace and a class. So all the classes are stored under the reference of namespace. Actually, to avoid ambiguity issues, these are all configured like this. Now, it is not done actually. So now suppose if this is having this React component is having a constructor, component is having a constructor, then here also you have to configure a constructor. Here also you have to configure a constructor. It is a constructor and it's compulsory that it should use, what is it? Super. Super. That means, remember, this is required if you are explicitly writing a constructor. If you are not writing a constructor, then no need of this. That means if your derived class doesn't require an explicit constructor, if it doesn't require an explicit constructor, no need of super. You don't need to import it, right? It is required only when you are writing a constructor explicitly. So if you are writing a constructor explicitly, then only you have to call, otherwise not required. For example, you see in this JavaScript file I showed you here, suppose you don't have a constructor. You don't have a constructor. You don't have a constructor, but by default, one constructor will be there in every class. You just have a print method. So you just have a print method, document.write. So this is base print. Okay. This is the base print method. Now here also you have a constructor. And here we have a document.write. This is derived constructor like this I am writing. Do I need to call the base class constructor here now? Not required, because there is no constructor explicitly defined for base class. There is no constructor explicitly defined for the base class, right? Remember here, when I run this actually, derived class constructor is coming. And when you go to the console here, so the print related issue will come. You see, it is asking this, right? So here, that means what does it means? When you create an object, then you need it. If you are not creating an object for this derived class, you don't need to call it until or unless you create an object. If object is created, it is compulsory to call. If object is not created, it's not necessary to call. See, if you don't have a constructor, here also we have a print method. We have a print method, document.write. Which print method this is? Derived print method. Already internally constructor will be there, but we are not calling it. If you are not calling it, there is no issue at all. There is no issue at all. Suppose if base class have a constructor, and derived class is not having a constructor, document.write, this is base. Okay, and you can see that the base constructor, so we create an object now, let obj is equal to new derived class, and you can see that it is working fine. There is no error. That is required only when you are creating a constructor in derived class. If derived class is not having a constructor, it's not necessary to call the base class constructor. It is not necessary to call the base class constructor. You have to call the base class constructor only when derived class have a constructor. Only when derived class have a constructor. Understood? That means here actually in our React, so in this React, do I need to call the constructor and super? It's not necessary. It's not necessary until or unless you want to use this constructor, right? You don't need to do this. Right? Later you need it. That's the reason basically I am defining here. Now, what should this class have to do? It's a component now. As per the rules of component, every component have to render some markup. Right? How it will mark up the, how it will render the markup? It uses a render method. By using a render method, it can return the markup. That means here, so we are using a heading. So suppose I said, welcome to, or say simply register class component, right? I'm defining register class component. Now, this I have to use in my startup. This I have to use in the startup. This I have to use in the startup means let's go in index.js. In index.js, what we define here. So we have to import that component. What is it? Register component. It is imported from the register component. But this time it is a class. It is not a function, right? And we have to start this npm start. So here we are rendering. Here one more important thing you will see. So we are configuring the class and we are defining the class. And generally, this render method have one point I will tell you. Generally, if it is a function is directly returning. So it uses the return, and this uses render method. So let me keep that point here, the component, and one more option. A class component must render markup. So by using render method, now you can see this is one option. So it says that render method will render the markup, right? But it needs a return statement for rendering the markup. That means we have to return this. So this is okay. This is working fine. That means actually this is render okay. What it should render? and in which memory it should be stored. That means this is a method now. It is a method. It is a method. So method will execute this. Okay, fine. But it should return this now. Executing, it is okay. Up to executing part it can do, but it should return it. That means this render method will render the content into DOM. So only when this result is stored in it. How to store the result of this inside render method? That means you have to use, again, here what you have to do, return. That means it should return, suppose I return directly this markup. I am writing directly this markup. It should return the markup. So you see it returns it. Of course, if you are returning multiple lines, you know the technique. So that means this result will be stored inside render method. This render method will render this into the virtual DOM. What is this render method is doing? It is rendering this into virtual DOM. It is rendering this into the virtual DOM. This is rendering into virtual DOM. What to render in the virtual DOM, you have to define it. Through return, you have to configure. Now, very important here is, here I am not configuring the constructor. I am just using render. Then here you can see there is no problem in this. So you don't need that constructor until or unless you try to use some members of this particular component. That I will tell you later, situation will come. As of now, you don't need to configure a constructor here. Directly you can define this. Now these days, developers don't prefer this. So officially React community don't prefer this. React community says that better use classes than functions than classes, right? Because you know what are the drawbacks of OOPs. Because class is a OOP member, right? So it is an OOP member. Let me give you this one. Example is this. So what are the drawbacks of OOPs? What are the drawbacks of OOPs? No drawbacks. So many are there. So one of the major drawback of object-oriented programming, it will not support so low level features. If any language is not supporting low level features, then it cannot directly interact with hardware services. It cannot directly interact with hardware services. That means it uses more memory. It is slow. It is tedious. It is slow. It is complex. It is complex in configurations. So this is heavy on application. So object-oriented programming is not a great language. We don't use this everywhere. We are not satisfied with this every time, right? For example, suppose if generally the main problem with this, suppose you have a refrigerator, TV, washing machines, air conditioners, microwave ovens. They are all controlled with a software, and you know that is embedded systems, right? That is C, not Java.NET programs, right? They are not Java.NET programs. So that means you don't have a Java program running in an AC, right? Because in a small chip, I need to put lot of controls, which directly should control the hardware. Hardware means fan swinging up and down, controlling the temperature of the compressor, right? These OOP languages cannot do. They need low level features. So that is the reason the languages like C, Python, Pascal are used. At a very high level also we use them. right? So that means for example, like space research. So NASA uses Pascal, Visual Pascal, for controlling its rovers on Mars, controlling its satellites. No Java.NET programs, right? That means they are not great every time. Why? Because from Earth, they given a command turn right. After 1 month, it will turn right on Mars, right? It will take millions of kilometers to travel and control a device. And you know that NASA lost communication with its previous rovers and launched new rovers. Why it lost communication? Because their memory is full. They can't take new commands. Are you serious? You are saying that NASA says memory full? They can put millions terabytes hard disk inside it? Na? No, they can't put. They have to send a small chip, lightweight, into space. Limited. It should control directly the hardware. So Java program, .NET programs are not suitable there, useless completely. That means you are using a 40,000 rupees mobile in compared with Symbian operating system, 1,000 rupees phone. You turn on both of them. This 1,000 rupees phone will load first. It will never hang up. It will respond fast. And your 40,000 Android is still loading. iOS is still loading. Right? Because you want features, you have to compromise with size. You have to compromise with speed. You have to compromise with direct interactions, right? If you have to use features, otherwise this is best. So that is the reason in a real world development process, why earlier people used classes, so not these functions. Because actually a difference I will tell you. That means what is difference between React function and the class component? This I will tell you. We will discuss component. What is difference between React and so function and class component? Earlier, better I should say this, because now you don't have any difference. Earlier, now in React 18 on 17 and higher version onwards, nothing. Whatever was there in class component, everything is available in function. Right? In React Advanced, nobody will prefer using class components, only functions. So official React community recommends that don't use classes anymore, but still they have classes, right? But we don't recommend using those classes. We do recommend those classes in some occasions when we need extensions. Wherever a module requires regular extension, component requires regular extension, then we can go with class. But that's also not required. We have other techniques now. That's what actually people who learned React earlier, they have this point difference between function component and class component. It's very popular in interviews also, but in React 18 like interviews, they can't ask this anymore. This question is useless now, right? Because in this we have all the features. Means React function, earlier people say that React function don't have hooks, life cycle hooks. Now class components have life cycle hooks. Class component have state. We have state everywhere. We have state in function component also. Those differences are gone, no more there. But we have to know in up to React 18 how the differences were. From React 18, what is new about the functions, we have to know. Those differences we will discuss tomorrow, right, in the next session. So in tomorrow's session, we will discuss difference between a function and class. After discussing the difference between function and class, then we will go into data binding concept. What is data binding and how it works, right? So this is just to tell you in how many ways we can create a component. Function component, class component, what is difference between these two, right? Tomorrow we'll continue, right?
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, I'm Supriya.
Yes.
So, which are the low-level features?
Low-level features means the programming languages which supports assemblers.
Assemblers.
You know, compiler, assembler, translator.
Yeah, I know.
Assembly level language. Huh?
Okay. Sir, could you please share yesterday's video?
Yeah, I will share those videos. I will share a new link to our registered users tomorrow. Okay. There I will
Okay.
all those videos. Huh?
Oh, okay. Thank you, sir.
Yes, Srikar. Yes. Srikar.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes.
So this is my first lecture. I have registered. So I want to know, do we have classes on regular basis?
What regular basis?
Like we have class every day from like Monday to Sunday, or is there any off?
It is continuous Monday to Saturday.
Monday to Friday. Okay, Sundays are off. Okay.
Sunday off.
Okay, fine.